So the next roundtable is called Planet and People Positive Companies. We've been speaking the whole morning about this shift, the shift the food industry needs to make. So I am going to invite to the stage my three panelists. They represent three organizations that are working very hard to promote that shift in the food system. So with me, we're going to have three astonishing and fantastic speakers. So please join the stage, Kayalin, Noramay, and Gabe, and a big round of applause. Okay, so hopefully the people join us. They are still visiting the market. They're listening to the entrepreneurs presenting their very interesting solutions. But here we will be speaking about how, from different perspectives, so from an investment point of view, from a startup point of view, and a software company, how can we really transform the food system? So the first question is, what is really this better food system for each one of you, and what is your organization doing to put forward that shift? So please, Kayalin, maybe we start with you.
Perfect. Hello. First of all, hello. It's so exciting to be with everybody, and so excited to be with you and you guys in person. So I think when it comes to my vision and Ford's vision for the future of the food system, we really want to see the way that we create things fundamentally shift. The way that all the inputs into the food that we create, from ingredients to materials to the farming practices that have gone into growing those, to create more low emissions inputs, to create ultimately more low emissions products, which is going to change what is on shelf in terms of what consumers have access to purchasing, making those only more climate-friendly choices, ideally, and then ultimately being able to align across the food system, those incentives to make that possible. But I also recognize how incredibly difficult that is for every single player within that chain. So it's really easy to say, in 10 years, I'll walk into a grocery store and everything's going to be climate friendly, and there's going to be upcycled products over here and regenerative products over here, and everything will be lower emissions, everyone will be climatarians. But there's a ton of difficulty in terms of actually getting to that. And so those specific challenges are what Planet Forward has set out to solve. So we are now the leading climate management softwares for the consumer industry, with a huge focus on solving the climate-related challenges for food and beverage businesses. And so when we think about what some of those difficulties would be in terms of making that vision come true, you would need to know the climate impact of every single ingredient that you have access to. You would need to know the difference that it would make if a particular ingredient was grown with regenerative practices in this particular environment versus conventional in another. You would need to know what that means for the products that you're creating and how that translates into the total footprint of your company with respect to the climate goals that you've put in place. And you would need to know what that's going to cost you, because obviously that's an extremely important input as well. So what we've done, one of our main innovations is that we've been able to reduce the cost and time of conducting a life cycle assessment, which is basically the science behind how you measure the environmental impact of any particular material or product, by over 90%. So we're going to talk a lot about accessibility. One of the things that's really important in all of this is making this feasible for businesses to do. So we work with companies in two main ways. One is product lifecycle assessments. We can measure the carbon footprint of any product, any material, any input, and the entire product portfolio of a large food company. And we also do scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon footprinting to help companies understand how they can reduce the total footprint related to their businesses. And then we really unlocked a lot of data science behind all of that, so we can tell you what would be the impact if we were able to shift X% of our sourcing to regenerative suppliers in this particular region for this particular ingredient group. What if we were able to lightweight our packaging by X% for these particular product categories, so on and so forth, so that companies actually have clarity as to how to get to that end state vision and what they need to do to get there. So that is the vision, and little by little I believe that we're getting there, but it takes a ton of investment on behalf of companies software, for example, is being able to do that to make it easier for food businesses to get to that end state.
And I love the fact that you have also launched a CPG company that has demonstrated and shown that this is actually possible. So you are not only telling food companies what they should do, how they should do it, but you all actually have a gold standard and example of what can be done.
Buenas tardes. Lo siento, no hablar español, necesito practicar un poquito más. Sí, okay.
Just keep going.
Próximo. Okay. Me llamo Gabriel. My name is Gabe. I'm the co-founder of Plant People. We create regenerative, doctor-formulated, functional foods and supplements that address people's most pressing needs, whether it's sleep, stress, mental health, brain health, anxiety, so on and so forth. But what I envision for a sustainable future, food future, is one that moves away from sustainable and into the idea of regenerative. There's only 15 out of 500 million farms that are actually regenerative. So there's an enormous opportunity to invest in that category. The second is local, whether it is a backyard garden or investing, spending time in your local farmers markets or small businesses. I think a defragmented or a fragmented, refragmented food system is going to be critical. The second is accessible and humane, one that invests in the well-being of people as well as planet. And the third is, or I guess that's fourth, is simple. I believe that food should be simple. If we can't pronounce or understand the ingredients, and it's not something that our grandmothers could understand, then we probably shouldn't be eating it. So that is my way of saying we don't always have to innovate our way out, but sometimes returning to the most simple ways that things were done is also very effective. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I love it. My Mexican mother would always describe her food as simple when it was the most complicated 2-day ordeal to make. So I have to chuckle a little at that. I'm Noramay, Cadena, colimense. ¿Hay algún colimense? No? Yo solita. Perdón? Colombiano, okay. And I'm one of the partners of Supply Change Capital, and we're an early stage venture capital firm out of Los Angeles and Chicago, really focused on investing in the future of the food system as we see it. And for us, the two major forces impacting the future of food are climate and culture. And so we see climate impacts on the supply side of the food system, and then cultural demands on the demand side. So cultural implications on the demand side. And particularly across the US, as we see demographic shifts, we know that the rising economic power centers want to see themselves represented on the shelf, that we're looking for this back to basics kind of food in a format that is better for you and also better for the planet. So we are investing across the supply chain in early stage companies that are building companies both for venture returns and for impact.
Great start. So we are speaking about a huge shift that cannot only rely on us. We are not going to be able to transform the world and see the impact we want to see. So we need to convince or incentivize many different types of actors throughout the whole supply chain. So I was wondering, what do you see as a good incentive for these different actors? How can we convince farmers, manufacturers, investors, institutions, people to make that shift?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges and most beautiful things about the food system is that it is such a food system. Like today, the food system is responsible for over 30% of global emissions, but it is truly made up of individual interconnected players from what you just said, farmers all the way up to retailers. And so when I think about this, I really think about it as kind of a trickle-down effect, right? We have at the point of consumer purchase is where ultimately value is captured in terms of a consumer buying a product on a shelf, online, wherever it is that they've made that purchasing decision. And everything that happens from the bottom up ultimately feeds into that moment. And so one of the things that I'm both thinking about super critically and working with the food system on is how we can start to transition that value all the way through. So one really awesome thing about, like I said, everyone's interconnected. So scope 3 emissions within the climate frameworks, everybody's somebody else's scope 3. So outside of only buying each other's products and selling different services to each other, we also now have a relationship in terms of responsibility to reduce the emissions of each other's businesses. If you're a retailer, your scope 3 is all of the brands that you carry. If you're a brand, your scope 3 is all of the suppliers that you purchase from. If you are an ingredient manufacturer, then your scope 3 is all of the farmers that you purchase from or that you work with. And so this creates a new kind of dynamic in terms of relationships and another incentive that's at play outside of strictly purchase and sell. So some of the things that we're starting to see now is, as a retailer, you cannot reduce your carbon footprint without the work of the brands that you carry. 98% of Walmart's footprint is the brands that ultimately are sold within Walmart. Walmart has no chance at achieving its net zero target, which it's now put out very publicly and is being held accountable to. It can't get the brands that it carries to work with them on reducing their footprint. So Walmart has every incentive in the world to try to get those brands to do so. And one beautiful thing that they have as a retailer is the ability to be able to amplify low emissions products. They can create better outcomes for the brands they carry if those brands are low emissions by things such as creating end caps dedicated to sustainable brands. Recently, they launched an entire digital platform focused on clean beauty products to move away from heavy chemicals within the beauty industry. The same thing is possible within food, thinking about having different filters and different opportunities to amplify regenerative brands, upcycled brands, lower emissions products. And so once we start to have retailers, which this is all happening, Walmart is doing this, Kroger is doing this, specialty retailers like Thrive Market and all of that are all doing this. That puts brands in a place where there's a growth upside for them if they're able to reduce the footprint related to their own products. And it's actually an 8% growth upside based on some data that McKinsey and Nielsen recently put out. And so it starts at the top, and then brands are in a position where if there's a growth upside potential for them in creating a lower emissions product, now we have more room to be able to potentially take a 2-cent hit, for example, on an ingredient that we want to source that has a lower emissions footprint because it's grown more sustainably than someone else. Without that wiggle room, it's really hard for a brand to be able to justify switching from supplier X to supplier B because they're more sustainable, and so on and so forth. Those incentives start to play out all the way through the food system to be able to create premiums for farmers so that they have more security, safety, and upside of being able to shift to more sustainable practices. So I think that is what we're starting to see, and I think as that continues to double down, today 40% of consumers purchase their groceries online at least once a month, and what that means is that there's also tremendously more upside and availability in terms of visibility into how your food was grown, what it contained, how it was done, is it more sustainable, and all of those things mean that there's more and more opportunity to create additional value for sustainable inputs and products, and as long as the players are doing their role, then I think we're going to get there, and it's starting right now. It's very much in a voluntary state right now, but I think that'll become the norm really quickly.
We will actually have in the afternoon a representative from Walmart speaking to their sustainability strategy. So let's hear what they have to say, because they do have a huge power in all this transformation. We are speaking in the end about people buying that product that we have finally achieved to get it in the retail store, in the shelf. It takes a lot of effort and investment to bring that product to the shelf, but in order for that product to survive, it has to be accepted, and it also has to be culturally accepted, right? So I'd love to speak about how we can promote and push forward these culturally loved and accepted products to the market. Maybe starting with investment, because your portfolio really reflects those types of products.
Yeah, I can can give you an example of this, and a big part of our thesis is really investing in companies that are buying for the community in terms of culture. One of those examples is a company called Agua Bonita, which is an agua fresca company, founded by a Latina who grew up in the California Central Valley, daughter to farm workers picking fruits, and she now upcycles those fruits and creates agua fresca in a can that's, you know, just like what you may have grown up drinking, in a format that is better for you and also climate positive. That is one example where we think that culture really is represented on the shelf in a better format. Another example of that is through the use of fermentation technology. I know we've talked about fermentation already today, and that's a company that is really appreciating our consumption of coffee. I know I've had about 2 cups today, but also recognizing the deep climate and water impact of coffee production. And they are recreating coffee using byproducts from the coffee industry, but without the coffee bean. So using 90% less water, 90% less greenhouse gas emissions. And so again, it's the same but different. And then there's a third company I would highlight that is utilizing waste water from food manufacturing. When I say wastewater, you don't get the best picture in your head. So utilizing water from food and beverage manufacturing, upcycling it, and creating feedstock for fermentation companies. So they can support the creation of flour that is decoupled from agriculture in its entirety. So it feeds our need for protein without the agricultural implication. But those are some of the examples that we really think about.
So I believe that the way we can sort of proliferate these products into widespread cultural adoption, aside from distribution, marketing dollars, is function and flavor. So we create supplements and functional foods that really do impact people's health in a profound way. As long as we're creating a product, to be honest, I feel like kind of part of the problem, right? Most likely someone will take our jar or our pouch and they'll throw it in the trash, not recycle it. And so I take a lot of pride in making sure that if we're going to create a product, it is very effective and useful. This means we put a lot of active ingredients into our products to ensure we have a positive customer outcome. And we also make sure that it tastes absolutely delicious so that people are excited and looking forward to eating it, sharing it with their friends, and the rest is sort of easy. It allows us to compete on shelves. We're in Whole Foods nationally, Vitamin Shop nationally, without a lot of marketing dollars because people truly support and appreciate what it is that we're doing. The second way I think we can bring these products or foods, ingredients into mainstream is through the work with chefs and industry. So I also have a restaurant in Los Angeles. I'm a chef by trade. And one of the critical strategies when we launched Plant People was introducing these ingredients to people through this universal language of food. It creates an entry point to understand, appreciate, and try things in a way that's familiar. And when people can sit around the table, discuss, laugh, and be full, the willingness to incorporate that into one's life moving forward is a lot easier. So I would say flavor, function, and food itself.
Thanks for bringing in the word flavor, because we haven't spoken about that during the whole morning, and I believe it's still the main driver for purchase. So thanks to the fact that you're a chef, you thought about flavor.
Be delicious.
So you did mention new functional ingredients, and it is really difficult for companies to be able to claim that their product has a specific functionality. So claims and regulation is going to be another difficult challenge for industry. So we need to see how we also influence these regulators so that new and better products can come into the market. Maybe first we can speak about the environmental claims. We've seen how the European Union has introduced new regulation that is more strict as to what we can put on a label, and it has been very strict for years regarding health claims. And this can have its positive and negative effects because it's also very difficult to introduce those positive claims as well.
Totally. And yeah, I would say the other piece of that is storytelling. People ultimately connect with the food that they eat before they ever get to try it. Oftentimes it's on shelf, unless you're in a restaurant, it's just with your chef or something like that. So storytelling behind your brand, being able to talk about the story of it, extremely important. But yes, very heavily regulated, both on the health side and with respect to environmental claims. So I think, over the last however long up until now, it's kind of been the wild, wild west in terms of what brands are allowed to say about their products. We had the green guides in the US, which dictated environmental claims that hadn't been updated in over 15 years. And so all of the kind of just mass explosion of all the things that are possible within that time also was being accounted for in terms of what was being regulated. So we've started to see people revisit. The green guides are getting rewritten. Yes, the EU green claims guidance is coming out and clamping down super hard. And it's honestly really important, I think, for businesses that are actually doing the work. If you are an up-and-coming, young startup brand that's doing everything you can to be more sustainable for the world, take Moonshot, for example, the brand that we launched. We truly invested in having a fully regenerative supply chain. We truly invested in having fully recyclable packaging. We truly invested in having carbon neutral operations. Those things came at a cost in a time when it was really difficult to do that as a super young brand. And if we go out to market and we say, we're carbon neutral and we're regenerative and we're this, and then somebody else said the exact same thing but did none of the work behind it, we're going to get eaten, right? And that's not fair. We actually want, if there are people out there in the world looking to be able to reward brands that are doing the right thing, we want to make sure that their dollars actually go to the brands that are doing the work. And so there's been a huge explosion of greenwashing for that exact reason. And that's the reason that the regulations are now starting to address that. And I think that ideally the impact of that is that we get to a place where doing the work equals getting the reward, and that's where we really want to be. Just tactically, really quickly, in terms of what that's going to mean for businesses. The green claims guidance, for example, is now going to require a life cycle assessment for brands to be able to make sustainable claims related to their products. So you actually have to have the data to be able to back, a certain specific claim about the sustainability of your product. And that's why the work that Planet Forward is doing is so important. Making life cycle assessments accessible, scalable, something that you can do for every product across an entire product portfolio means that it's possible to actually have the data you need to tell authentic stories about your products in a way that consumers are going to resonate with and doesn't put your brand at risk. So I'm happy about it, although it's going to be a headache.
And also investors have a huge role in catalyzing these types of solutions because they are not only looking at return, but they're also now looking at impact. So how can we bear all these new costs to elaborate these better products and still have investors be interested in putting their capital in our companies?
That's a great question. We're part of a growing segment of venture capital firms known as emerging VCs that are coming in with a different lens on what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. Just last week we released our inaugural impact report, which talks about our lens, talks about our interest in health, the environment, and diversity, and how our portfolio reflects that. But what can companies do? I think that's really your question. We think a lot about scalability. So we think about the decoupling from ag is one way to ensure scalability, but we really deep dive on the operations of the business and how operations heavy or light a business might be. And so if you're a company that is in this space, you're thinking hard about impact, that is where the investor will likely zoom in and focus to really understand what are the drivers of cost in the operation. We know what the margins are at pre-seed, we know for consumer product, we know what the margin should be at seed, and so we'll be digging in to see whether you have a plan to go from what your operations are now to where they should be in order to have a company that scales.
Really appreciate it. Maybe Gabe, as a people-positive company, can you share your struggles when you're trying to bring the best product to the market, but at the same time you have to bear with all that cost?
Yeah, I think for us it's about, for us we want to be honest and transparent, and I think it's okay to not be perfect. There's a desire as a young, small brand to want to do everything perfectly. But the truth is that it's really just not possible if we want to keep the lights on. And so we weigh, what we make our decisions based on what can we do now and how can we promise to continually improve moving forward. We're a certified B Corp, we're certified climate neutral, but part of those programs is a promise for continual improvement. Because we know the opportunity to positively impact people through these active ingredients that are from biodiverse, independent farms all around the world, we invest heavily in that, making sure that we put enough ingredient in our product that it actually delivers on the promise we say, or the light claim, to the point that we say we will bring to someone. A good example of packaging, right, is the glass versus plastic debate. And we had all of our jars, and they were glass jars. And it was great from a consumer perspective. Everyone said, "Oh my God, you guys are in glass. This is amazing. I want this product." The truth is that it was pretty darn bad. We were bringing glass overseas. We were bringing in aluminum labels, aluminum lids, labels, etc. In order for that glass to be recycled, the label needs to be peeled off. It really wasn't happening, not to mention the carbon that was the carbon footprint of those shipments. So we actually switched to a post-consumer recycled material that is produced 15 minutes from our factory. So we localized the supply chain. It's one piece bag, and we reduced the carbon footprint. I think it's 1% of what it was. Not to mention, we also can ship that product for $3 per unit instead of $8. So all of a sudden, it became very beneficial for our business, but that comes along with the need to educate and tell the customers why and how these decisions were made. So I think it's always there's no right decision, but every decision has an implication that comes along with a lot of education.
So just to end on an urgent optimist note, I'd like each one of you to share what can we do to actually make this shift. Kayalin?
Yeah, let's see. I think everybody has our own role, and I think that that's the important piece back to, aligning incentives, retailers doing what they can do, brands doing what they can do, ingredient producers doing what they can do. What I am really focused on doing is making all of the different trade-offs of all of those different decisions extremely clear to every single player within the system. In Gabe's case, in a pre-data world, you're making a lot of those decisions blind. You're thinking, okay, maybe I should choose to use glass because that looks more sustainable. But in reality, it was the other choice, and it had all of these other implications for you. I want businesses to be empowered to be able to make those decisions and have all of the data and visibility at their hands to be able to prioritize the thing that's going to create the biggest impact and going to make sense for their business. And so one of the things that we're doing in line with that, when I talk about having this vast life cycle assessment database with all of the impacts of all of the different things, we're helping businesses start to put climate data alongside cost data in all of the decisions they're making, whether that's in product development, whether that's in procurement, whether that's in merchandising, then we can very clearly see the trade-offs between different financial investments and the climate impact that will happen there. And that same system can now be applied to consumers. We're working with companies like Just Salad and Blue Apron and all of these others to start carbon labeling their menus and carbon labeling their products on shelf, so that all of a sudden, the same way that we're thinking about decisions on the business side is the way that consumers can start to think about them at the point of purchase. And creating more climate literacy, breaking open that, next level of us thinking about climate alongside all of the other considerations that we have as we're making decisions is really what I want to do. And then it's everyone else's job to hopefully make those decisions with the right values in mind.
The question, what would I do? What would we do? I would say, if given the opportunity, purchase seasonal, local, and organic. Grow your own food, if only an herb box. I think that is one of the most powerful things that we can do, not only to start owning our own food, but also connecting us to the true pace of life and what it takes and the magic that occurs in agriculture and growing. And through that, we develop more respect, more reverence, and more connectedness to our environment and the food that we consume. So grow something.
Hashtag homesteading.
Yeah, exactly. If only I could afford land.
I love it. So on my end, only investing in food and food tech businesses that are improving health outcomes and reducing or reversing the food system impact on climate.
Wow, so that was a sign that we have to finish this round table. There was a lot of magic, passion, and ideas as to what we can do. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you. Big applause. Continuamos con la siguiente mesa redonda. Como saben,